Welcome to Uncopyable Women in Business. I'm Kay Miller, also known as Muffler Mama. I've been the #1 salesperson in a male-dominated industry, a successful entrepreneur for over 30 years, and now my mission is to help you build a business and brand nobody else can compete with. If you're ready to break out of the pack and create your own uncopyable advantage, stay tuned. My guests and I are here to help. I am excited to welcome Dr. Jane Sojka to the podcast. Jane is a professor of marketing at the University of Cincinnati, where she created a pioneering sales course just for women, helping thousands build the skills and confidence to succeed in male-dominated industries. She is also the author of a new fantastic book, my word, Women Empower, Your Guidebook to Risk, Resilience, and Confidence, which is packed with real stories and practical strategies that women like me and you listening can use to step into our power. Jane, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Kay. What a lovely introduction. It is truly an honor to be here and to talk with you again.
Well, I'm the one who's honored, but thank you so much. When I first interviewed you, it was episode number 7, and I was a rookie. And I have to admit, I'm going to own it. I'm not going to say I'm sorry, because that's something you're not supposed to do, and say I'm sorry to say that I have greatly improved at my interviewing skills since then. One thing I have to throw out, this is such a fun coincidence, because here you are in Cincinnati, I'm outside Seattle, and yet you got your doctorate degree at Washington State University in the tiny town of Pullman, Washington, where I also went to school. Only got a bachelor, but isn't that fun?
It is fun. And I was thinking the Cougars, all right? Go Cougars. And then as my academic career progressed, I was a Cougar, I was a Bobcat, and now I'm a Bearcat. And I have dogs. So somehow, I'm not sure how that cat theme is coming along, but good times at Washington State. And I am forever grateful for the faculty who helped me and supported me. And that was honestly where I started looking into women and B2B sales. And that was really gutsy for the faculty to let me do a dissertation on that topic at that time. So kudos out to Washington State.
Right. Kudos to the Cougs. And I have to say, I am lucky enough to hold one of these books, and it says 2K, go Cougs. Yeah, I love that. So if you're watching, this is a beautiful book. It's got a beautiful pink cover, and the subtitle is Your Guidebook to Risk, Resilience, and Confidence. This is not something that you just read. It's not, no offense, a textbook. It is something for you to get involved in. And I showed Jane earlier just some of the notes I wrote, all the many dog ears and Post-it notes I put in. I'm struggling to think about where we should start, because it's all so great. But I do want to ask you, first of all, what was it that inspired you to write this book?
Wow, that's a good question. I think it was, I started teaching women, and I'm going to follow your lead and say, I really had no idea what I was doing. I knew that women sold differently than men, and then I had been taught, but other than that, I didn't really know. And so, and as the acknowledgements, indicate the dedication, it's dedicated to my students, because I learned so much from my students and where the education gaps were. And then, okay, this is what they need to learn. Let's see if this helps them get there. And so I was able to, that works. And really, there was nothing else on the market that I could find. And I wanted to send my students out with something tangible after the class was over. If you forget your notes, here you go. Here's the book.
One of the things I've noticed for years is repetition is how we learn. If we hear something, especially just textbook type teaching where do this, do that, it doesn't stick with us. So we have to be reminded over and over And that's really good for people like me who are teaching people and you how to be confident. It's a message that bears repeating, to say the least. One thing that struck me is that you are so accomplished, and yet you are willing to be vulnerable and admit that you also have these fears of failure. And as we talked about before we recorded, if you look on social media, it just looks like everyone's doing fantastic. They are so successful. Business is great. They're confident. And yet we talk to people for real, clients, associates, your students, whoever. And that's not how it is. So kudos to you. I don't know if you want to speak to that at all, how scary it was to be vulnerable.
Thank you for noticing, and thank you for noticing. I'm a Brene Brown fan, and I think she is the one that brought that vulnerability to the forefront. But it was scary for the reason, I stand up as a professor in front of anywhere from 30. I've not taught sales to 600, but I've had 600 students in a large lecture before, and they're looking at you like you are the expert. And so the first time I tried it, and I don't remember what example I gave. It may have been my tenure track position, and how
I think it was your tenure that you actually started giving up on tenure because you didn't think you'd make it.
Yeah, and and like that was a big moment for me. That was really scary, and I thought, okay, I am going to try this. I am sure my teaching evaluations that I live and die on are going to tank, but I'm going to take that risk. And ironically, as Brene Brown suggests, it had the exact opposite. They respected me more, and it became, she has had the same struggles that I've had. And I think it's really, really important. And this was another reason why I want to share my failures, was that students would look at me and say, "Oh, wow, look at that. She's so good." No, I'm not that smart. I'm not that good. I've failed too. I'm scared too. You can do this. If I can do this, you can do this. And I think that also inspires them to be their best selves.
Yeah, that real factor is definitely just so refreshing. One of the things I love that you said is fear of failure is courage, or I don't know exactly how you said it, but tell us in your words, how is that? How are we saying, okay, if we're afraid of failure and we do what we're afraid of, that's courage.
It takes courage. Courage is feeling the fear and moving forward anyway. What happens with fear of failure? Because, we're taught from second grade, failure, you learn from your mistakes. And it's true. I mean, could I please learn from my successes? Please, just once, no, we don't.
The answer's no.
We learn from failure. But many times, especially in that learning loop, we end up ruminating over the failure instead of picking out what we need and moving forward. Fear, what we know from consumer behavior research, which is really what I studied if I wasn't studying sales research, is fear is paralyzing. It was research done during 9/11, and it was how to get people interested in the military. Is it that we say, be a patriot and, show your colors for the United States, or we are under attack and you need to protect yourself? The fear message, people just hunker down. It's paralyzing. And so when we're afraid, we don't take a risk. We don't apply for the job. We don't ask for the close. We don't raise our hand in the meeting. And so it's really important for me to teach my students the difference between the fear versus fear of failure. And then with fear of failure, the antidote is not getting rid of the fear, because you're going to feel the fear. I always feel the fear, but it's resilience. What's the worst that can happen? They say no. Nobody dies, at least in, thank goodness, our line of work. Okay. Our line of work, nobody dies. So what's the worst that can happen? They say no. What do you move on? And that's how, fear loses its power when they say no big deal. And so you take the risk. So that's why I'm so big on intentionally teaching students and women and men, honestly, how to become resilient, how to practice resilience.
Hey there. This podcast is meant to give you an uncopyable advantage. If you're ready to jump on the fast track, go to beuncopyable.com/K. You'll get the scoop on my books, webinars, personal consulting, and our Moose Market. It's all designed to help you stand out, sell more, grow your business and brand in a way that's truly uncopyable. Once again, that's beuncopyable.com/K. Now, back to the show. And I remember from our last interview, you actually encouraged your students to go out and ask for things that you know somebody will say no or no to. And some of them are ridiculous. Like, hey, can I have $20? Yeah, no, you can't have $20. Yeah. Well, and again, you don't die. Nothing really bad happens. You heard no and you survived. One of the things that I liked about that applies to me is that there are things about fear that you might not think of. One of them, a big one for me, is perfectionism. I say, I just want it right. I want it to be perfect. But what I'm afraid of is releasing it when it's not perfect. What will people think? What will, how will this reflect on me? And that stops me in my tracks. It's fear. Perfectionism, you pointed out, I don't remember hearing that before, is fear.
It really is. I call them self-limiting behaviors because we're doing it to ourselves. Okay. Nobody expects you to be perfect. You are the one who is laying it on yourself to be perfect. And there's enough people who want to limit us. We do not need to be limiting ourselves. And perfection is a perfect example because if you wait for it to be perfect, it never gets done. It's chasing the horizon, but it's a hard one to get over. It's a hard one to get over.
It is such a hard one. I'm actually in the process of creating a program on sales that I know so well, and yet I am really struggling. I keep writing it and I say, this isn't right. It could be better. And so it doesn't get done. You talked about that in the book. Well, if you have that attitude, it never happens. So then
in fact, the book is a good example because like you, okay, I had written it and rewritten it and probably revised it 5 different times. And I had taken out sections, like just small chapters, because I had the vision. I wanted it to be a workbook. I wanted it to be fun to read, that women and men open and say, oh yeah, I want to look at this. And so we had chapters and I had a meeting with an editor for another meeting. And I happened to, have one of these chapters with the illustrations and everything there. And she picked it up and started reading. And I thought, oh my gosh, because I had no intention of showing it to her because it wasn't perfect yet. Right. And she read the first 2 paragraphs and said, you write really well. And I walked out with a book contract. But that's how close this book never came to being because that perfectionist. So even though I write about it, I still struggle with it. My favorite quotation, you teach that which you need to learn. Elizabeth Lesser. And it is really true. I am still learning all of this.
And here you are, a tenured professor. I think that's what's so encouraging. You have the cred. You have the cred, girl. I love the fact that you said the word girlfriend in this book because you think of a professor as so dignified and unapproachable, and you're just a delight to talk to. So I want to talk about a couple things in this book. When we talked about it, you said this is the type of book where you don't have to read cover to cover. In fact, I don't even think you should. My words. You can bounce around. You can read what resonates with you, and that might even change over time. I would like to lay out for people listening and watching the sections of the book. The first one is self-limiting behaviors. And perfectionism is probably one of them, right?
Yes, it is.
Resilience strategies. That is what I'm going to say probably resonated with me the most personally. Confidently communicate. Confidence. And the fourth one is lift as you climb. I started out in male-dominated industries, and like you talk about in the book, the people that held me back the most were other women.
Every time, as I started in this journey, I would make that statement, and I would women, and I call them my age, between 50 and 80. Okay. I'm getting closer to the 80 side.
I better raise it to 90. Because we're both.
I'm not a college student. 100%. 100% agreement that women undercut our careers more than men. And, I'm in the research field and you don't get 100%. And then I was taking that statistic or making the statement to my students, and I would see the women nod their heads. And I'm thinking, okay, this has to stop now. We have to learn, but once again, intentionally learn. How do you lift other women up? How do you get past that competition that I think, I don't know. I don't even know what don't even want to say where it comes from, but it's unnecessary. It's cooperation and abundance. How do we create a culture of cooperation abundance instead of competition and scarcity? And so I have some of those in my book, and the students really like those.
And I don't know, it feels like that's changed over the years. That's what this podcast is all about. I think it's also who you surround yourself with. I'm sure there are arenas of the business world, in life, whatever, where it's still really tough. I have interviewed some amazing women who have started as interns, risen to CEOs. Again, a lot of the times they cite the men who have supported them. I interviewed let's see if I can say it right, Sergeant at Arms of the U.S. Senate, one of just a few women in that position. She was a 3-star general in the Army for years. The men supported her. So even though this podcast is Uncopyable Women in Business, I've actually interviewed people all over the map. But hey, ladies, girlfriends listening, the pie can only get bigger. We're not sharing something that's limited. You talk about that. Think abundantly.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, Lisa Turquoise, one of my favorite quotations, and her success does not threaten mine. And I would add, we're all on a different path. There's always another job. There's always another customer. There's always another teaching award. Her success does not threaten mine. But the fact that I can say that from memory tells you how many times I had to repeat that to myself as I was, because I was trained to see women as competition. I agree with you. I think those days are getting fewer, but I think we actively need to support each other. I'd also like to add, because I love men too. The book was for women and designed for women, but ironically, the editor was a man. And so when my publisher assigned me an editor and it was a man, I was like, really? Really? Did you look at the title of this book? And it turned out to be one of the best things that could have happened, because number one, he would say, you know what? I needed to read this. This is important. I tried it and it worked. And I thought, you know what? I bet you there are some men who are out there who are scared too. Good. And that's kind of the trajectory Brene Brown went to. So I'm like, oh, good. I'm glad you're helping. I'm helping you too. And then he would come back and say, this section, my mom and my sister needed this. So I shared this with them. And, men become our best allies. So we need our fangirls, and we need our men allies too.
Our fan dudes.
Yes, our fan dudes. I like that.
All right. One thing, you can see me taking notes if you're watching this on the video, but there are differences in how women and men sell. And that's something I've kind of danced around on the podcast in some ways, because I think, is that too big of a generalization? But I really, in my experience and working, I was the first woman ever hired in my first job for outside sales. I was one of few women in my second job. And I can still think of examples where I was with my boss and we'd be on a sales call and the customer would say, well, will that be here within the 4 to 6 weeks? And he'd say, oh yeah, no problem. And then we leave and I'm thinking, no, it won't. There's no point in lying about it. So I've got to call the customer and say, by the way, that's not going to happen. Unfortunately, how can I work with you? And I don't know, should I make that generalization that women and men sell differently?
That is a tough one, Kay, and I wrestle with that all the time. Okay. because actually in my field of marketing, segmentation and target markets, we are always generalizing about people. And so I think it's fair to say yes. And however, one of the outgrowths of my work is that I'm now working on a course for engineers, because if you think about it, engineers, they're very good at the math, but my father was an engineer. I mean, they're not necessarily outgoing people. Now there's some outgoing engineers, but many of them are like me, introverts. And do I have to go to a party? How long do I have to stay? And bring a book, because what else are you going to do at a party, right? And so I need to teach them this, similar skills that I would teach some women, okay, in terms of putting yourself out there and talking to strangers and asking for the close. So, get back to your question, I think there are some general differences. I think we can all learn from each other, and then choose the best that fits us personally.
That's right. Everyone, we're all unique. We're all different. Absolutely. So we'll just leave that alone, because there are men that struggle with confidence. There are women that struggle with confidence. We all are in this together. All of us, we're humans, right? We're real.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I do. I'm going to hold this book up again, and I'm going to recommend that you buy it. The link to order it on Amazon is in the show notes. It is Women in Power. Very importantly, your guidebook to risk, resilience, and confidence. I want to talk about a couple of the things that I feel like apply to me the most. Okay. I've had women on the podcast. One comes to mind, Susie Haran. I can't remember the episode. Probably one of the most positive people I've ever met. And she said, I was just born happy. I just have a sunny attitude. And I say, I am so jealous. Because people that know me, they think that I do have that kind of attitude, and I'm an extrovert. My husband jokes that when there's a party, the opposite of you. I'm the first to get there and the last to leave. He's an introvert. We have to drive separately. And that's okay. Everyone's different. I think one thing that's kind of funny and amusing is that some people think they're not cut out for sales because they're introverts. Yeah. And some people think I'd be great at sales because I have the gift of gab. Well, I have the gift of gab. And one of my big challenges is to shut up and listen. So,
yeah. And those are, you're right. Those are typical stereotypes. And no, they're not true. And in fact, at one time I teased my students and say, this is sales for introverts. If this is for all of you who are sales for people who don't think they can sell, because yes, you can. And here's the skill set, but I am with you. I am not a positive person by nature. I have to practice smiling. I have to consciously smile. And so, like one of the resilience, I bet this one was a challenge for you. The resilience strategy, stay positive in the process. That is really hard. And I'll give you an example. Anytime technology goes awry, which is probably once a day for me, I get down the pit. This is it. This is the problem with technology. I'm too old for this. I can't figure it out. Why did they have to upgrade it? Da-da-da-da-da. And I go spinning down the pit. If I would, Jane, you can do this. You figured it out before. You can smart enough, know what to do. There are people who can help you. I can get it done much quicker than when I'm sitting there going down the pit and saying I can't do it. And so whenever I can think positive in the process, the whole thing goes much smoother. But you really, I have to actively work at that. And that's part of those resilience strategies. We know it, but you have to actively work at it.
Something just popped into my mind, and this really isn't a male or female thing, probably. It's a personality thing, but I've noticed this with my husband, Steve, who is good at technology. But I'm also decent at technology too. It might be the TV or the computer or whatever. And if something goes wrong, I think, what am I missing? How come I'm not getting this? What's the problem? And when that happens to him, he says, what's wrong with this thing? Why isn't this it's not responding to my request. He blames the technology. I blame myself.
Kind of goes back to what we were chatting about before we started recording. My students are not allowed to say the word the S word, sorry. And what the research shows, number one, and this is any married couple will tell you this, women apologize a lot more than men do, okay? That's it. Part of the research will show that women find more things that they feel like they should apologize for. Like, here's the situation. You throw out the newspaper by mistake. Should you apologize? Should you not? Women will say, oh yeah, you should apologize. Men will say, no big deal. But the research that struck me the most, it was a graduate class. And so the professor gave everybody an F on an exam and then asked the students, why did you fail? The women, it was, I'm not good enough. I didn't study enough. I don't belong here. They blamed themselves. The men blamed the professor. Didn't do a good enough job teaching. And, so on the one hand, so we say, I'm sorry, I'm late. Well, you know what? It's traffic. It's not your fault. I'm sorry, your food is cold. Well, that's the cook. That's not your fault. Okay. So women tend to apologize for everything. And then conversely, when it's a compliment, what do you do when you get a compliment? Either I deflect it. Oh, I'm not really that good of a teacher. I have good students, which is true. I have good students, but I also work very, very hard at my craft. Or I deflect it. Oh, I like your hair too. Your hair looks great too. Instead of saying, thank you, accepting the compliment, shut up, or I have to say, thank you, I accept the compliment, but it's really hard. So it's interesting to see that dichotomy.
And when I first opened the podcast and talked about how I have improved, I felt like it was bragging or not owning the fact that I have improved.
Yeah.
How have I improved? Because I've done the work, and it's okay to say I've gotten a lot better. It's okay to say I'm going to even get way better still. I have a lot in front of me, but yes, women, we need to own those compliments.
Yeah.
I do say sorry way too often. And I'm sorry about this.
When my students tell me there's a song, "Sorry, I'm Not Sorry," and I haven't found it yet. I'm sure younger people will know, but that is really true. And building on that, I mean, on the one hand, I am with you. Whenever I have to submit a bio, I mean, I hate talking about myself. I mean, and I think that's in some ways, humility is good, and certainly we don't want to be braggarts. Okay. So that's okay. But that's where those fangirls really come in, where I can talk about how good you are and what a good salesperson you are and how good your podcast is. And then you don't have to talk about yourself. And that's a really important way that we support other women is bragging about them and supporting them.
And that's something we touched on before the podcast too, because I said, I don't want to do all the talking, but the talking I'm doing is mostly about you, and the credibility is more powerful when I say how great your book is, how much I admire you, what you've accomplished, than for you to say that. So that is something I do work on, even just passing on kind words.
Yes.
I went to a concert, very small concert outdoor at the golf club. And afterwards, I went up to the band and I said, I really enjoyed your performance, and told them about that. Oh, they lit up. So that kind of is a little bit of a diversion, but I do want to mention one thing, and that is that all those negative thoughts, press pause and change the tape. Now, that is a generalization. Sorry, I meant that is a generation thing, because you might not remember the LPs, which are coming back, actually.
Yes.
I don't think cassettes are coming back. I don't think.
Or 8-tracks. I don't see a future in 8-tracks.
So, and funny story there. My husband's father was one of the inventors of the 8-track. If you want to learn about that, read his book, Uncopyable. of the original Uncopyable book. It's pretty interesting. So I do have a story that isn't really my own, but it's just, I've never forgotten this story. When my daughter was about 7 or 8, she was taking piano lessons. We were only parents. She's an only child. We were the helicopter parents. We put her in everything. And she had a piano teacher, and her name was Kay, coincidentally, Kay Hancock. And the first time that I drove Kelly to take a lesson, this was many years ago. I think I had a cell phone, but not sure. She gave me directions, and she said, okay, you turn right on Star Lake Road. Well, I followed those directions and I didn't find her house. Turns out there were 2 Star Lake roads. So there was one close to me, and then it somehow looped around and went way down to where she was. And that was the Star Lake Road that she meant. So fast forward 20 years later, I ran into her at a concert at her church. I think it was, something about Christmas Eve. And I talked with her, and she said, I'm still so sorry that I gave you the wrong directions. And I had not thought it. I couldn't have told you that. 20 years she'd been carrying that.
Yeah. Yeah.
That tape. Yeah. We have those negative thoughts. Why? Why do they keep playing? You need to change that tape. Some of the things that I do are affirmations, positive sayings. I also love to listen to music. And so you've got great strategies in the book for not only shutting that tape down, but replacing it.
Yeah. My experience, because my tape play, it would play all the time. Okay. Every time I would make a mistake, it's just the same stupid, fat, and ugly. You're never going to mount, da, 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 da. I mean, we all have them. I mean, we all have them. And in this life, I've heard students, you'll never be as good as your older brother. I mean, oh, come on. You'd be so pretty if you lost 10 pounds. Oh, give me a break. You have to be 3 times better than everyone else because you're Black and you're a woman. Well, how can you be 3 times better than anybody? Putting that. And so we have these tapes, and my experience is that you can't erase them. They will always be there. And also, maybe some people can control their thoughts to stop them, but I'm not able to do that. They play. And the reason why I'm so particular about this is I can't control a lot of the stuff that's going on around me. And believe me, I've tried. Okay. That's another self-limiting behavior. Control. I like to control, and I can't. But I can control what I think, and I can control how I react to it. And so it's so important when this negative tape starts to play that you drown it out. That's my idea, is drown it out. Because then, you've got the positive drowning out the negative. The other thing I would notice on these, since, like I say, I don't think you can erase them. Maybe some people can, but that's not been my experience and my students' experience. When I'm hungry or when I'm tired, in other words, my physical resources are down, that is when the tape is more likely to play, and it's harder to drown it out because I'm tired and I'm hungry. Okay, so those resources. And I find that also very interesting. But I work on that one. I had to work on that like every day, twice a day. Get the tape out.
The times that we're vulnerable, the times we were hangry.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. It's when you're tired. I can't, this is just not going to work, da, 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 da. Well, it always looks better in the morning. You just call it what it is, go to bed, get some rest, and then try it again.
Well, I applaud your vulnerability. I applaud the fact that you are so accomplished and that you have felt called to share everything that you've learned and experienced so far in this book, and that so many women and men, anyone who reads this book, you can pick up and read it wherever, you're called to look, and you can journal, you can write, you can put Post-it notes and dog ears like I've done. So I highly recommend you buy this book. And Jane, really, I appreciate you writing it and sharing this with with my podcast audience. And so I'm just going to close it out and say, thank you so very much for being on the podcast.
Well, thank you, Kay. I really appreciate your kind words and your support. So I thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Uncopyable Women in Business. If you enjoyed it, please follow, rate, and review the show. And be sure to visit beuncopyable.com/K. Always remember, be uncopyable.